This is the boost pump. It brings seawater from the beach up to the Watermaker. The water is picked up with this foot valve. It goes through this suction hose into the boost pump, which then forces the seawater up a 30-meter hose to the Watermaker. This is the seawater supply hose, which is the output of the boost pump. It is connected to this fitting here. And this is the seawater discharge. The green hose sends the unused seawater back to the beach. The black cable is the main power cable for the Watermaker, and the blue cable is the power cable for the boost pump. The water comes from here. It is routed through the case and arrives at this fitting here. This valve, in the run position, directs the seawater from this fitting back to the primary pre-filter. The inlet fitting is over here. It passes through the filter and into this secondary pre-filter. The water then goes into the high pressure pump. The high pressure pump pumps seawater through this black hose and into the membrane pressure vessel. The seawater passes through the vessel and comes out behind the control panel through this black hose and back into this fitting. The pressure is regulated by this pressure control valve. The valve is dialed to increase or decrease the pressure. This can be monitored by looking at the pressure gauge. The unusable seawater goes through the Watermaker and is discharged back to the ocean via the green hose. Back at the membrane pressure vessel, there is a second hose called the product water hose, also known as the freshwater hose, and that's right here. It goes to this red valve over here, and from here, it can be directed to two places. The first one is to a sample or test hose, and the second is to a tank. At the moment, it is in the test position. When the valve is in this position, it leads the water out of the Watermaker through a sample hose and into a 20-liter bucket. After the seawater supply hose is connected, turn the boost pump on to ensure that water is flowing through the system. The water will eventually come out of the green seawater discharge hose. And before you turn on the high pressure pump, you want to make sure there is no air in the system. Check for air in the primary filter by opening the bleed valve. To bleed the air out of the secondary filter, push down on the red valve until you have water flow with no bubbles. Once the air is out of the low pressure system, you can turn on the high pressure pump. But first, make sure the pressure valve is turned all the way counterclockwise. Then turn it on and let it run for a minute or two to double check there are no bubbles in the system. Then you can start dialing up the pressure. After a few turns, you'll see the needle start to move. You want to take the pressure up to 800 psi. After a few seconds at pressure, you will get product water out of the sample hose. When you are satisfied that the water is good, you can switch the small red valve from sample to tank. Once your tanks are full and it's time to shut down the system, switch back to sample and turn the pressure control valve counterclockwise to bring the pressure back down to zero. When the pressure is at zero, turn off the high pressure pump. You can then turn off the boost pump as well. Before shutting down the system for the day, it needs to be flushed. That means putting fresh water back through the system. The first step is to fill a 20-liter bucket with fresh water. Place the flush hose in the bucket and make sure the end of the hose is at the very bottom of the bucket. Turn the big valve to the flush position and then turn on the high pressure pump. If you look in the bucket, you will see that water is being drawn from the bucket into the system. No pressure is added to the system. The water is simply allowed to drop down. When the water level reaches about 50 millimeters from the bottom, shut the system down. It's important to shut off the high pressure pump before it starts to draw air. This may cause problems. Every day after the system is flushed and shut down, the filters need to be cleaned. You begin with the primary filter. You open it by releasing the spring clamp and popping it down. It takes a fair bit of nudging to loosen off the lid. Once the cover is off, pull out the filter disc stack. Loosen it off with a couple of turns, and all the filter rings will be exposed. These can be rinsed off with fresh water. If need be, they can be wiped off with a damp rag. When the filter discs are clean, gently tighten the stack back up. Place the filter stack back on its stand and reattach the lid. Next is the secondary filter. This one simply unscrews. Once you have removed the secondary filter from the Watermaker, it can be cleaned with fresh water and a rag. At Open Ocean, we like to set the filter that was just removed in the sun to dry and place a fresh one in the system. You can then rotate between the two with each use. Before putting the filter back, make sure that the O-ring is well seated. Then the filter is ready to be returned to its home.